It's a very interesting history. Cuba was at the very brunt of when the Europeans came. They say that the native population was wiped out in about 50 years. By the middle of the 1500s, the native population was pretty much gone, and then they started bringing in the slaves from Africa. So Cuba had 400 years of Spanish rule, 400 years. And for various reasons, manifest destiny and so on, our country from the very beginning has wanted Cuba. George Washington talked to Spain about annexing Cuba. That was a conversation all the way through the history of our 250-year republic. And that culminated with what we refer to as the Spanish-American War. During the colonial period, there were a lot of slave uprisings because the slave population in Cuba was so dense because of Spain was by far the richest Spanish colony, by far the richest. And the United States often wanted to take it, and a lot of that tied in with the politics in this country with slavery. The southern states wanted Cuba to be a part of what we had in order to strengthen their position and so on. And in the 1860s, 1870s was the first War of Independence in Cuba. And it lasted for about 10 years, and Spain crushed the attempt for independence. Then in about 1895, they had their second War of Independence. And this time, the Cubans were at the verge of winning, and the U.S. saw Cuba slipping away into a sovereign status. And so that's when we intervened, Teddy Roosevelt, Rough Riders, all of that narrative that we've been raised with, that we went down and somehow saved them and won it. Basically what we did is we stole the war from them, which they had just about won. During those two wars of independence, about 1/3 of the Cuban people died. And that was the intensity of those two wars. And just in 1889, when we intervened, they were on the verge of winning that war. And we went in and sort of took it over to the point that the U.S. signed the peace treaty with Spain in Madrid and didn't even involve the Cuban revolutionaries. So basically what we did there is that we took control of Cuba for the next 60 years. We had our public governments and so on, but politically and economically the U.S. controlled Cuba from about the turn of the century until 1959, when they had their third War of Independence. And the Cuban people refer to the Castro Revolution as their third War of Independence. And this is when they finally got sovereignty. But the revolutionaries in Cuba knew their history. This was in 1959. In 1953, the U.S. Threw out the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran to get the Shah back in. In 1954, we threw out the democratically elected reformist President of Guatemala, Arbez, because he was threatening agrarian reform. We invaded from Honduras. So the Castro brothers knew their history, and they knew that if they didn't get a protector, Bay of Pigs in '61, trade embargo in '62, that they were going to follow that path. And so that's why they needed to have the Soviet Union as a protector. And that's, so we've had the trade embargo in place, which is still in place for 55 years. The travel ban is still on the books, but it has sort of dissipated with the commercial flights and so on, but it is still there. When I went to Cuba in 09 coincide, I guess, with the 20th friendship. We were talking to some of the staff at the medical school there, and they were telling us just what that trade embargo meant in real life for Cubans. And for example, the trade embargo, which we still enforce, says that if the U.S., if citizens from the U.S. own at least 20% of a foreign company, then we have that control and it comes under the embargo. And they were talking about they had a neonatal unit at their hospital there in Havana, and they had to suspend usage of their neonatal unit because they had gotten the neonatal units from a company in Canada, and U.S. interests bought 20% of that company, and they could no longer get parts for their neonatal unit. So it's really, it's just a cruelty. So anyhow, just to keep that in mind as we talk about what's happening now, that basically what's happening is that Cuba is determined to be sovereign this time around, and to this point they have, much of it due to groups like Pastors for Peace. And with that, I'll have Gail.
May I turn the lights up just a little bit?
Yes, please do.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. This is a great opportunity for me and my dear brother, friend, Bill Hill. Many of you know Bill. Bill has been a member of the Caravan team almost since we began doing these caravans to Cuba in, I want to say 1992. 88 was in Nicaragua when we began organizing caravans in Central America. But we've been organizing these U.S.-Cuba friendshipment caravans into Cuba since '92. Prior to that, just by way of a little bit of background and history, IFCO, which there's a lot of acronyms here, but IFCO, which stands for the Interreligious Foundation for Community Organization, is a 50-year-old, this is our 50th anniversary this year, faith-based organization committed to community organizing, helping to identify areas of social injustice and ways to kind of push back and confront them. And we do that on a local, national, international level, and the international work is what brought us really in to do the work here connected to Cuba. Prior to that, we had been organizing caravans of humanitarian aid under the banner of our project titled Pastors for Peace to Central America. That began when IFCO was organizing a delegation of regular everyday folk from the U.S. to travel to Nicaragua in the 1980s, 1988. Ronald Reagan was in the White House, and he had coined this term of low-intensity warfare, supporting the oxymoron in itself, right? Low-intensity war. The folk that he was lifting up as the freedom fighters were the Contra. These were the former National Guardsmen of Somoza, the dictator in Nicaragua. And Reagan was claiming they were the freedom fighters and that the Sandinistas were these horrible guerrillas that needed to be put down. And we found out firsthand that that was clearly not the case. We were on a passenger ferry that was attacked by the Nicaraguan Contra. And in that attack, there were 2 people who were killed, and there were 29 people who were wounded. And one of the wounded was my father, Lucius Walker, who was the founding director of IFCO Pastors. And some of you know him. I know he's been through Roanoke and different parts of this region. But he was a founding director. He was, they picked the wrong boat in the wrong time because they had a community organizer, a Baptist preacher, a U.S. citizen who could certainly talk about the fact that it was our U.S. tax dollars that paid for the bullet that struck him and that injured so many others and killed at least 2 people that day. We don't know. The wounds were so significant. There's certainly possible that other people did pass away from their wounds. He was in the hospital, prayed for a response to this act of terror, and conceived of the idea of organizing caravans as a way to do a couple things. To travel through the United States, educating people about U.S. policy, particularly in Nicaragua at that time, and to allow people to provide humanitarian aid, not as a charity, but as a way of expressing love and solidarity, people to people. So we refer to it as an alternative people's foreign policy initiative. And 6 months after that attack was the first caravan to Nicaragua. That was in Christmas Eve of 1988. And then we began organizing caravans to other countries in the region because the policy was very similar within that entire region. So we had Nicaragua and then Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Chiapas, and in 1992, at the request of some friends in Cuba, the clergy, progressive clergy in Cuba, that asked whether we would consider organizing a similar initiative to Cuba. And we knew that to do that would require taking on this policy of embargo. Cubans refer to it as a blockade because of the ways, and Herb began to talk about the ways in which pressure is put on other countries to also isolate and alienate and punish Cuba. So they refer to it as a blockade. We knew that to do the work in Cuba would require facing the risk of $25,000 in fines, 10 years in prison, because these were the punishment that was being hung out over our heads for doing what the government, the U.S. government, referred to as trading with the enemy. So by taking medicines and school supplies and Bibles and bicycles and powdered milk and you name it, we were trading with the enemies. Little school buses like the one out in front and even larger. But we decided and knew, and we, following the vision of my dad, Reverend Lucius Walker, we decided to travel to Cuba as a challenge. To go to Cuba, not only to bring aid, but to travel there to see firsthand the reality, because there were restrictions on people's ability to actually visit Cuba and see and understand the people, the culture, the systems that they had in place. And we felt that what that really, the purpose behind that was really to keep folk in the dark, to keep them unclear as to just what it is that this island nation was all about. The only way for people really to have a real clear understanding of a people and of a culture is to be able to have an exchange with them. And so we decided to take a page out of the book of Mahatma Gandhi, of Martin Luther King, and to use civil disobedience as a way of pushing back against what we felt was an unjust law, and that was to take gifts of friendship to Cuba and to visit Cuba, even though we were being told that we could not do that and could face these fines and imprisonment. So that's how the caravans to Cuba began, and we refer to them as the U.S.-Cuba Friendship and Caravan. This year is our 28th friendship, and this is our 25th anniversary. A lot of numbers, right? 50 is 20, 28, but it's really just underscores our faith in what we've been able to do collectively. Some of the things that Herb referred to in terms of some of the changes that have taken place, some of us know back in December 17, 2014, that then President Barack Obama began dialogue with Cuban President Raul Castro, and they began to work toward this normalizing of relations. There's very little that's really normal about relations between the U.S. and Cuba, but it was at least an opening, and we were really pleased to see for the first time a U.S. president in more than 90 some odd years visit Cuba. We were pleased to see that there was this opening around at least dialoguing, sitting down with the Cubans. The opening of travel, opportunities for people to travel from the United States directly without necessarily being confronted with the same level of punishment was promising. That said, there's still restrictions. That said, there are still aspects of the blockade, the embargo that are in place, continue to be in place, and we continue to do the organizing of the caravans for that reason, and help people understand just what's changed, what's yet to be accomplished, and what more we can do to really reverse this blockade policy in its entirety. So there are some people who have claimed, this is your 28th caravan. You've been doing this for 25 years. On the one hand, why are you doing it? The blockade's over. Obama and Castro talked and it's done. It's a done deal. We can fly there and do whatever we want to do and drive around in old cars and smoke cigars. Done. Check. That's on one side. On the other hand, you have people who will say, you're doing this for 25 years. Nothing's changed. You're still organizing caravans. Why are you still continuing to do this? So my response to the first claim is that it is not over. That there are still restrictions, for example, on travel. Yes, people can fly from their individual countries to Cuba, but they have to fit within certain categories of travel. There are 12 different categories. So there are church groups can go down. There are, so there's a religious license. There's a license for researchers, for educators, for medical professionals. There's certain categories of people that can travel down, and that's great. Wonderful. We think it's great for people to be able to go down. But not everybody fits into those categories. So there's still, it's still a way to sort of restrict who can go, to a certain extent who can go, and to a certain extent what they can do while they're there. Because in reality, people may go to the beach, they may do, they have beautiful beaches, but allegedly tourism is not an option, and tourism is obviously something that would benefit the Cuban economy. So there are still ways in which this process of allowing people to go is restricted, and it's the only country in the world in which this situation exists. We're able to get on a plane and go anywhere else. And to maintain this is, we think, an effort to maintain control over how people see Cuba, how they relate to Cuba, how their understanding of it. And so some of that, the things that we've heard about Cuba, the negative things that we've heard about Cuba persist. And that's part of the reason that we've really taken advantage of the caravans as a way to spread, to bring information. There's information about health in Cuba, and people are curious about the issue of race, and we've got a brochure on that. Religion. I went to a meeting once and there was a young woman, she couldn't have been more than 20 years old. She said, there's no church in Cuba. And I said, no, my dear, you're completely misled and misinformed. The LGBT community is thriving in Cuba. A lot of people are not clear on that. There's information about Guantanamo and some of the bills that are being proposed in Congress. So we're using the caravan as an opportunity to really spread information about the reality of the Cuban Revolution and just what the challenges that still remain. So that's on the one side. Blockade, embargo, still in place. You're wrong when you say that that's not the case. On the other hand, there are people who say, well, you've been doing this for 25 years. Why do you keep doing this? You clearly haven't won anything. And I would argue that what we collectively, those of us who have gone to Cuba, who have come and supported not only IFCO Pastors for Peace, but other initiatives in which people are really trying to talk about the real situation in Cuba, that our voices collectively have said, you know what, this is ridiculous that we are maintaining this long-standing, arbitrary, mean-spirited, there's a lot of adjectives that we can put in there, policy toward Cuba. Even our members of the Cuban American community, who at one point were, adamant that the embargo, that the blockade needed to stay in place. Even they have begun to really open up and express support of some kind of working toward normalizing of relations. It may be different for the reasons that we do, that I do, but it's still, poll after poll, an indication that more and more people are interested in seeing this policy change. So that's happened, I think, because of our collective voice. So I would argue that if some of the work that we've not been doing, and some of it has been through the Friendship and Caravan, that we would perhaps not be as far along as we are. The importance of not only speaking out and providing information about Cuba, it becomes clear when we understand that this policy, this U.S. policy toward Cuba, this blockade, cannot be undone without Congress. At one point, we used to say, with the stroke of a pen, the president can, can do away with the blockade, and that's no longer the case. Bill Clinton came into power and decided to really codify the embargo, the blockade, into law. And so that moment, that ability to really focus on the president was lost once he did that. And now the only way we're going to really see this policy reversed is through congressional action. And so we've been really trying to go to Washington, and also, more importantly than in Washington, in our district offices. One of the things that we have done on this caravan is to visit members of Congress and their staff in the districts. And the reason it's important to do it in the districts is because they need to hear from their constituents. So Gail Walker, who lives in New Jersey and works in New York, can go to the the representative of Virginia, and I apologize, I don't have the name on the tip of my tongue, but I can't, he or she is not going to listen to me the same way he or she would listen to one of his or her constituents. And we're told that time and time again. So I do what I do when I go to Washington and when I go locally to talk to Booker and Menendez, which is a challenge, but I do it anyway. I kind of shake it off and go in, and I get beat up, but I get up and dust off and go back and continue to provide them with information. Because I feel that they're misinformed. But the point is that these are the things that are going to really be required if we're going to really, I think, turn this policy around. But there are still aspects. There's not just the travel restrictions. There's still aspects of trade that cannot be, that Cuba is being punished. Cuba must trade in dollars. They're trading, they're not able to trade on credit, although there's a bank called the Stonegate Bank, which has, I think, going to begin opening up opportunities for Cuba to do trade on a different kind of level. But it's a challenge. There's the fact that there are boats that may travel to Cuba, but if they do, they can't travel to the U.S. 6 months before or after. Well, that's a way of punishing, let's say, a boatload of China that wants to send a boatload of rice, can do that. They could just decide to come all the way across and travel with and trade with Cuba, and at the expense of the opportunity to trade with the U.S. But that's highly unlikely. So that's pressuring China in this case to suspend trade with Cuba and to instead trade with the U.S. So these are just examples of some of the things that are still in place, despite the fact that it's easier for people to be able to get there, and despite the fact that we've been talking about this normalizing relations. It's not a done thing yet by any stretch of the imagination. So that's what we've been doing with the caravan. Bill and I have been traveling since, I'm kind of getting lost, Bill, when we started, but
I think we started on the 11th, didn't we?
that sounds about right. Yeah. So on the 11th, and we've been stopping in different cities along the way, and we're one of 6 different routes traveling through the U.S. So in total, these 6 different routes have hit almost 50 cities or towns and 30 states. over the past 2 weeks. This is our last stop before we head back up to New York. This is actually the last event of the caravan because the others had finished just last night. So it's an honor for us to finish and go out with a bang by coming and visiting with you here in Roanoke. But it's really, we feel, important work to do, and we continue to do it. It's been interesting because this year, the caravan, we decided to advance the schedule. Many of you may know that normally we are on the road in July. We come through, we do the events, and then we make our way to Texas. We have in the past when we had aid through Texas, and then to Mexico, then to Cuba. These last few years, we've been focusing more on the information sharing. Our Cuban friends were saying it would be helpful as you make these visits to help people really get clarity on what is Guantanamo, you know, because there's a lot of people who just know of Guantanamo as, you know, a place where there's, you know, torture or prisoners. Well, long before the U.S. Had set up a prison there, they had occupied this territory of Cuba, and it's sovereign territory of Cuba, and the Cubans want it back. And so this is a brochure that helps people to understand some of that history. So we said we're going to take the caravan and we're going to really, instead of collecting the humanitarian aid, which was more of a gesture of solidarity, we're going to focus on information sharing. And we decided, and then traveling to Cuba later. So we decided this year to begin this process in the spring. And essentially because we wanted to put, we've been referring to him as 45, the new guy in the White House. We wanted to put him on notice that, we really don't want to be pushed back. What President Obama was able to accomplish was something we're proud of, we're happy to have seen, and we want to make sure that we don't go backwards. That's why our t-shirts this year say, let's keep moving with Cuba. So the idea is we want to keep the momentum going, we want to keep moving forward. And on the back we've got our check-off list. We've freed the Cuban Five. We've been able to remove Cuba from the list of states that support terror, a list that it should never have been on, but it's off that list. But there's still work to be done. We've got to end the economic blockade of Cuba. We've got to end the travel ban for all. We've got to, what else do we have to do? Return Guantanamo Bay to Cuba, and we have to end the efforts at regime change that continue to be, you know, really an insidious way in which U.S. policy continues to try to undermine Cuba. So there's work to be done, and we feel it's important to not rest on our laurels and think that our work is done. Because if we stop here, shame on us. We're convinced that we will, in many ways, there could be a reversal of many of these things. Unfortunately, the only thing that the President Obama was able to do was through executive order. Those can be reversed by 45. They can be reversed, and we don't want to see that. So we wanted to put him on notice, put his administration on notice, that we won't be pushed back. So we're organizing this educational aspect of the caravan in the spring, and in the summer, we'll still be going to Cuba as part of our traditional travel challenge, and, you know, allowing people to go and see Cuba for themselves. And I'm hopeful that maybe there'll be somebody from Roanoke, maybe, who might travel on the caravan. And I'm happy to talk about that. And if not to travel on the caravan, maybe to sponsor a young person who might be able to go from a different region. We've been in the South, and I'm really, really eager. I've got a couple of 2 or 3 young people I've got my eye on, and I want to try to talk to them. And some of them, they're really bright and excited, but you know, economically challenged. And I said, well, we'll work on that. There are ways to work around that. But that's what we're doing. That's why we're here, and we're grateful for the support that you all have provided, not just here, but in all of the different places that we've stopped. Many of you, some of you know some of this history, maybe for some of you it's new, but the point is the work has had it's rooted in this history of really fighting to speak up and act out against an unjust policy. And that work continues to happen. My dad passed away in 2010. We lost him in 2010, but the spirit, the tenacity, the bravery, the smarts, the commitment to fight for justice, and the belief that we can collectively really, that we stay the course, reverse this blockade policy is something that we believe in. I know my brother Bill, I call him my brother from another mother. We've been traveling down, we've been doing this for a while, and there's nobody I'd rather be traveling with than this man. He's a great friend, and he's had his own tremendous experiences, and I'm sure he'll share. I heard you talking while you were eating over here. Yeah, so he's also a wealth of information. So that's who we are and why we're here. Was there something else that I was going to
Tell us more about the trip in July.
Yeah, so in July, what we're going to be doing, we're going to travel from individual communities to Mexico. We'll be in Mexico. We're going to spend 2 days there in solidarity with groups that are working to support Cuba, understanding some of the work that they're doing there, having a better understanding of how internationally there's support for Cuba and what the folk in Mexico are doing. Then we're going to fly to Cuba. We had initially, and we're still hopeful that we might be able to do this. We're going to certainly spend some time in Mexico. We'll spend some time in Santa Clara. This is the 50th anniversary. Who's the young man with the Che t-shirt? This is the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Che, and the Cubans are going to be marking this occasion with all kinds of activities in Santa Clara, where there's the mausoleum, but also the museum, where there's others who fought with him or laid to rest. So it's a really important place for the Cubans, marking the importance of Che Guevara. So we'll spend some time there, and we're hoping, and it's a little challenge, but we're hoping to still get to Oriente, Santa Clara, and Santiago and Guantanamo. I've never been to Guantanamo. I've been to Cuba a number of times, but I've never been to Guantanamo. The reason it's possible that may not happen has to do with fuel, which has to do with, in many ways, Venezuela. And Venezuela has been a great support for Cuba for many years. But Venezuela is under attack in many ways, and there's all kinds of challenges that they're facing. But the fuel that was provided by Venezuela is reduced, and so there are challenges, economic challenges that Cuba's facing in regards to fuel. But that's the idea. We'll be spending 10 days. We'll be visiting with community centers, churches. There's the Martin Luther King Center, some of you may know, is celebrating its a historic benchmark. Is it their 50th also? I think so. But we'll be visiting with different, learning about the med school, visiting with the Federation of Cuban Women, the med school being the Latin America School of Medicine, what else is on our list? The Literacy Museum, really trying to give people at least a flavor, a sense of Cuba. We'll also be there during July 26th, which is essentially the Independence Day in many ways for Cuba. So we'll be there, and we'll get a chance to go out into the communities and be hosted by the different CDRs, Committees in Defense of the Revolution, which are essentially block clubs that will bring us into their homes, into their neighborhoods, and we'll get a chance to really dialogue on a one-on-one basis with Cubans, and that's always a great treat. So that's the kind of stuff that we'll be doing. We're still working out all of the exact details of the program, especially because of this potential change with the travel to the east. I'm hopeful we can find a way to do that, because I think it'll be important for people to have. It's important for people to understand that there's a different flavor and culture in many ways on the east than there is in the west, and so whatever we can do to help people be exposed to as much as possible in Cuba is always a good thing.
Have there been bills in Congress to end the blockade?
There had been, there are actually,
Who's been sponsoring them and how have they fared?
what's really wonderful is that, and there's information, and I would hope that all of you will pick up information on the table, but there are a number of bills. There's several bills, some that I think may be more successful than others, according to our friends that really work on Capitol Hill and have a little more clarity. But essentially, this brochure talks about bills that are being proposed in both the House and the Senate. They are focused on trade and on travel. And then there's one that really would like to see the whole blockade eradicated. It's a little less likely that that's going to get any traction immediately. But the great thing about this is that these are bipartisan bills. So it's not just the Democrats, but you've got a sizable number of Republicans, that are really trying to also push for change. Again, undoubtedly for different reasons than you or I might be, but many of them recognize that they are on the outside looking in, that they are the only ones that haven't been at the table when it comes to any of the business opportunities. Cuba is a country with a mixed economy. They are open to sort of exploring all of the various options at their disposal. They're very pleased that there have been at least 26, I believe, memorandums of understanding that have been established between the U.S. and Cuba. There are, as you know, a number of airlines that have jumped on the bandwagon in terms of traveling down. I was just reading an article on the way down on the bus about two of the airlines, I think Frontier and I don't know if it was Spirit, but it was one of those like budget airlines that said this isn't working for us, and they pulled out because they felt there was too much competition. And there seemed to be an indication initially that maybe there was more hoopla about travel to Cuba, and that wasn't going to be as big a deal as once thought. But in fact, the bigger airlines are jumping in to try to, at least to bid, to take those slots. So there's still a lot of interest. There's an incredible number of people that want to go, that are going. So I think that these Congress people recognize that, and they recognize that poll after poll, as I've indicated, people are really interested in seeing a different relationship with Cuba. So they're following their constituents, which is why it's important for their constituents to go and let them know that they want them to support these kinds of bills. So that's just.
Help me to understand. I'm curious why all of the dark money, which pretty much controls politics here, why they aren't interested in breaking the blockade to make profits off of this new market in Cuba.
Yeah.
Why aren't they your allies? I mean, it was strange bedfellows, but still.
Yeah.
Why aren't they wanting to break the blockade? Why aren't they pushing our U.S. government to tap this new market for them?
I think that's a good question. I think what it is they're doing it in their own way. I think the idea of these folk traveling down on buses and talking about injustice, and that may be a little distasteful to them.
Sure.
But the overall end result, where you're right, strange bedfellows, but where there's common ground there. I was talking to one of our staff people who was in Boston during an event, and there was Congressman McGovern was there, and he acknowledged that the staff of the Cuban embassy in the U.S. embassy in Cuba, in Havana, was saying, had sent a message to the White House staff, the president, I guess, that they ought to don't try to reverse what Obama did. That it's working, and that at least the language that we're hearing is that there's encouragement on the part of the staff on the ground there to push 45 to maintain the status quo. But then again,
he likes the art of the deal.
He likes it, yeah, exactly. But shoots in the hip, right? You know, I mean, he just says crazy stuff. You wake up in the morning, you're trying to think, you're like, oh my God. So who knows whether he'll listen to those people or he's going to be, you know, come up with some other crazy thing. We don't know. I mean, we don't know what, the way I put it is that we don't know who's going to show up when it comes to really making a decision about Cuba policy. Is it going to be Mr. Art of the Deal, the businessman, or is it going to be the presidential candidate who promised, you know, all of his followers crazy things like we're going to undo everything Obama did vis-a-vis Cuba. So it's unknown. It's unknown. But I think you raise a very good point. I think that there are tremendous numbers of business people who are really ticked off that they're not at the table, that they're not there. They see every other country, you know, benefiting. And while it is strange bedfellows, and it's kind of, you have to kind of, you know, like, I mean, even when I go to on Capitol Hill, it's deep breaths, and you know, you put on the clothes, and you put it on, and you bring your packets, and you try to talk to folks, because at the end of the day, this thing is not going to get changed unless, you know, we convince those people in Washington to do that. And I think increasingly business is doing that. They may not be there side by side with Pastors for Peace, but they're putting pressure in their own way. So, but again, I can't reiterate enough. Even if you don't visit with your congressperson, just putting out an email, putting out, you know, I understand that these bills, flyers on the back, so maybe you'll know what bills. You know, and especially if you've got a Republican representative, would say that
Of course we do.
Yeah, no, I'm just being nice, but of course. You know, we went to go visit. Who did we go to visit?
Duo.
Gary Palmer in Birmingham, and his staff, and oh, it was really a sight to be seen, because I'm there and I'm kind of, in a way, Bill and I, in a way, sort of played good cop, bad cop. But I didn't realize we were doing it, because I come and I talk and I say, you know what I say, and I try with a very reasoned tone, and I take a deep breath when they say things that I don't like, you know, but I'm trying, well, Bill, you know, oh, well, let me tell you, and I'm a veteran, and they listened, you know, so they see this black girl kind of coming, and she's kind of nice, and then they've got, you know, Bill Hill, kind of, he's like, he's a veteran, and he's, you know, it's important to hear all of these different points of view, but it was great. I said, Bill, we need to take this show on the road, man. I guess we kind of are. So, it's good.
Could you say something about probably one of the most successful parts of the revolution, and that is the medical system in the school in Cuba, which is amazing?
I love talking about this. Yeah, so Cuba's commitment to medicine and medical treatment and medical training is world renowned. Even the Obama administration, you know, have had to, you know, acknowledge that. When it came to just recently the fight against Ebola, you know, recognizing how Cuba stood up and went to the front of the line and was remarked upon. The World WHO, the World Health Organization, gave them all kinds of kudos. Long before that, though, we know that, you know, for decades and decades, wherever there was a catastrophe or disaster, Cuba was there. So, in Central America, Hurricane Mitch, Hurricane George, you know, terrible, you know, catastrophes. Cuban doctors were there. The first Cuban doctor I met was in Nicaragua when we were there out in Bluefields. I said, oh, what are Cuban doctors doing here? Not knowing that this would come full circle in many ways in my life. You know, countless examples. Chernobyl, the various disasters in Pakistan, Haiti. Of course, Haiti was huge. Haiti was huge. You know that they wanted to come when Katrina hit, right? I mean, didn't we all watch helplessly? And I just tear up just thinking about the poor people of Louisiana and how they suffered and how they could have been assisted by some of these Cuban doctors, but Bush at the time said no. So there's a history there of just medical ingenuity and medical, you know, technology and commitment. In the year 2000, Fidel Castro conceived of an idea of taking a naval base and converting it into a medical school, a school for training. And the offer for U.S. Young people to go and take advantage of this training, to go and study to become doctors, came as a result of a delegation that was led by my dad, Congressional Black Caucus members, and rice farmers from Mississippi, who were commenting about health disparities. And I think Bill tells a story about the rice farmer, right? Bill, why don't you come tell the story? Come on up here, Bill. You know I like doing stuff with you.
Well,
Bring your bazooka with you.
the way Lucius told me this story was that they went down in the delegation with some Black Caucus members and some black rice farmers from Mississippi. And they were talking about medical stuff. And so Fidel spoke to one of the rice farmers and he says, I understand in Mississippi you have a hard time with medicine. And he says, well, let me tell you a little story. He said, I got in my car one morning and I had my little granddaughter with me. We drove 60 miles into town. We went to a clinic. And Fidel says, well, what happened at the clinic? And he says, well, there was no medicine. And so Fidel says, well, what did you do? And he says, what could I do? I put her back in the car. I drove 60 miles back home. And that's when Fidel said to Lucius, and what's his name?
Benny Thompson.
Benny Thompson from Mississippi. He said, I've opened up this school called the Latin School of Medical Sciences, and I'll allow Pastors for Peace to bring 500 poor students, you know, with mostly black and Latino, some white kids have went, but to school to come over there to learn medicine in a 7-year program, all in Spanish, with the understanding that they come back to the United States and they work in poor communities. And everybody says, well, that I heard a lot of people say, well, how can you make those kids do that? And I tell them it's like if you go to Cuba and you spend 7 years there, your brain is going to change. You're going to think and you're going to live and you're going to sleep and eat. You're going to be Cuban when you come back. And it's not that everybody's going to follow the rule, but he says come back and work in communities for the poor. And we have students like that little tape that's out there, Dare to Dream. It's about students that have graduated or students that are in school about to graduate. And just to hear them talk will make you cry. That wouldn't have happened had Lucius not taken that delegation, those Black Caucus, or those rice farmers, into a situation that who knew what was going to happen? Who knew that little dialogue, that little talk, would facilitate us having, what is it, 148 graduates?
145 graduates.
145 graduates, 90 in school, another 28 ready to graduate in July, and another 10 that we're going to take down in August. I mean, it's an ongoing thing, but it's like, where else can you go to a country that everybody calls communist, that we've had an embargo in place for 50 some odd years, to have the president of that country, the leader of that country, and the people of Cuba say, okay, bring them students here, let us teach them. There's 126 countries, there's 26,000 students in that school. Not all of them are on a scholarship, but some of them are on partial scholarships. But it's like, we're the richest country in the world, and we charge our kids $500,000 to go to school, and you have to pay it back. You know, you have to pay it back. Cuba doesn't have nothing. They're eating rice and beans and living poorly, but they're opening their doors and welcome our children in there. It's amazing. That's why I do this. Because I said a long time ago when everybody says, why do you keep doing this? And I say, the Cuban people need us. But more importantly, we need the Cuban people. They're the light to the rest of the world. And if we don't show them people what's there, if we don't come back and talk to people here, then we failed. People say, why do you continue to do this? Why not? It'd be easy to Okay, we won, we did it for 25 years, let's go home, I'm tired. I'm tired, I'm 72 years old. As Lucius Walker walked every day and did everything he could, I can continue to do his work. Maybe not as grand, maybe not talk as well as him, but he's here. That's part of it right there.
It's all emotional, I'm stoic, and then you start talking and going, thank you.
I'm curious about something. Which of those two countries would be the Christian country?
You know, I was curious.
Good question.
That's why, you know, often my dad used to say there is no contradiction between Cuban revolutionary, you know, commitment and teachings and his belief in the teachings of Christ.
I just got confused about the dialogue that the officials were having.
So I've gone to Cuba several times, and I've always come back and talked about the good things that I've seen there, and the hard things, you know, well, just the lack of medicines in the embargo, not that they didn't have the great doctors, but you go into the pharmacias and, you know, there's nothing there because they can't buy them. And I understand that beyond good doctors, they developed the best medical delivery system, even if they don't have the supplies that they need, but that whole delivery system is available to everybody and the literacy went up. But I've also talked about how Castro tried to eliminate racism and completely integrate the country. And I'm just wondering if I keep saying that, did that really happen? Because I saw it through my eyes, a lot of integration, so I'm just curious.
Yeah. You know, well, first, I would say, you know, and often the claim is that it was Castro that did that. I mean, I think that he was certainly a visionary leader, but there's no way that all of what Cuba has been able to be accomplished could be done with one person. Often, you know, people claim, you know, you hear the claims that, oh, they paid people to come out into the street like on May Day when there's, for as far as the eye can see and more, you know, throngs of people, that somehow people were forced, you know, to come out. It's just not the truth. I mean, the reality is that there really is an understanding of what they want their revolution to be and to stand for, and that it was perhaps, he was certainly a visionary leader, but that it was a collective, you know, consciousness that brought about change. Yeah, yeah. But in terms of race, I think, you know, Cuba is I think it's a tremendous place. I've been there countless times. I lost count. Bill's been there 27 times. So many of us have gone back and forth. It's not perfect. It's not a utopia. It's got challenges like anywhere. But the reality is, I think that they really do try to put people first. And so a country that provides the kind of health care that you refer to is a country that I admire, that provides education. And did we say that medical school scholarship that means that they graduate debt-free? That's what allows them to return home and practice in these underserved communities without the burden of how do they pay back these hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know, those are wonderful models of what it means to really, you know, invest in your people. I think the issue of race is an area that's different in Cuba than it is here, certainly. They're two different countries, two different histories. A lot of what Herb laid out is, you know, it helps to understand that. The reality is, the first time I went to Cuba, I was really, as a black woman, I was really impressed at the ways in which everything was sort of mixed, and it wasn't, you know, like, oh my goodness, there's a white person with a black, you know, white guy with a black woman, or vice versa, or whereas, you know, that's that we have our own baggage that we bring wherever we go, and I noticed, I was like, wow, this is kind of, I remember that being something I was conscious of. I know that the Cubans talk about their Africanness, they embrace that, and every hue, so there can be people as light as yourself or as dark as me, and they can be all African, or, at least, honor that and celebrate that expression. And I thought that was really incredible, to have the world leader, to have a Fidel Castro talk about that publicly in multiple ways. Incredible. We've in latter years had younger black, brown people who've gone to Cuba, and of course they want to see the reflection in various parts of society, and have questioned, well, how does Cuba deal with the issue of race? And that's why we've got a brochure to talk about some of what Cuba's been able to do, but some of the stuff that they continue to grapple with. They do it in a different way, because it's not, I think that Cubans will say to you, we're all Cuban. We're all Cuban. Now, if you talk to a darker-skinned Cuban who may have had a different sort of experience at different times, I wouldn't say, we certainly don't see the kind of police brutality, or the kinds of issues that we see here vis-a-vis black-white relations. There's nothing to compare, but when I look at there was a brochure that was in a hotel, and it was a tourist brochure. And as I looked through it, there were only two images of darker skinned people, and one was a cook and the other was taking care of a child. And I brought it to the attention of our friends, and I just said, this is disturbing to me, because why aren't there black folk that are the people on the beach, or if you're trying to really project an image of, where color is not an issue, then it needs to kind of be reflected even in some of your materials, or at least you need to have some level of sensitivity about the way in which these things get shared. So I think it's an ongoing conversation. We had a dialogue during one of the caravan visits the year before last year, and the last 2 years, around race, and talking about having an open conversation about that. And there's a commission that's been established, the Aponte Commission, where they're really, dialoguing and talking about this, and trying to, I think, really explore how do we address issues in the different sectors, in the business sector and the tourist sector and education. So I think it's an ongoing conversation, and I applaud them for being open to having that conversation. So that's the way I see it. So is it perfect? No, nowhere's perfect, but I think that there's no way that you can compare the issue of race in Cuba with the issue of race, certainly here in this country.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
Good.
Because I saw a lot of the same things of people, lighter skin, darker skin, hanging out together and seeing that mix.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it's
And
it's
both
impressive.
countries have a legacy of slavery. So
Right.
that's really interesting.
Right.
Here it seems to have dragged on.
I mean, the other thing too is that, many of the Cubans who left the triumph of the revolution might have been lighter skinned Cubans, and they have family that are in different parts of the U.S. that may be able to send back remittances to help with some of the business opportunities that are opening up in Cuba. So there's that can be an area of disparity, and so I think that there's a consciousness about it, and we're talking about how do we want to be supportive. Obviously, it's Cuba's role to work this through, but are there ways that we can make sure that the playing field is level? But I'll tell you, when it comes to support for the revolution, when it's support for Fidel, I had the honor of being in Santiago for the burial of Fidel, not for the burial, but for the memorial that they did, and it was really amazing just seeing the outpouring of love, and it was so touching across the country, and very simple, just Fidel on the back of a pickup truck, and the way he rode through the countryside. But vast majority of people who came out. I mean, especially when he was in Santiago, where it's an Afro-Cuban community.
Right.
The love was overwhelming, so it really exists. So, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
A big thank you to Bill and Gail for coming and sharing with us. Two more things. A big thank you also to Plowshare for co-sponsoring and getting the word out, helping with the hosting. And yes, they do have to get gas to get back to New York tomorrow. And there's a bowl out here for donations to Pastors for Peace if they'd like to contribute to that.
Yeah, that'd be great. If I can just say a little bit about the fundraising, just so you know, because it's the gas to get back, and that's it. But you know, the work that we've done, we do, you know, really as a labor of love. We have the honor of being the group to help facilitate rather the getting these young people down to study medicine, and we love it. But it comes with a cost to be able to get the packages down to them, to get them down there, those who don't have the funding. And so we raise money for a variety of different programmatic work. We know that besides we luckily have a pretty low rent. You know, electricity isn't too terribly high, but you know, all of those are reasons we need to raise money. But it's more the programmatic work that we continue to do. We don't get funding from foundations as much. We don't get, it's really passing the hat like this that makes our work possible. So whether you're able to give tonight, or we certainly hope that you'll sign a sign-up sheet so we can continue to be in touch with you to let you know, for example, when we go down in July, what happens if we wind up getting stopped. We don't know, because we don't know what kind of response there may be. We want to be able to call back and let our emergency response network know if there's any kind of challenge that we're experiencing, so that you can reach out to your elected officials and help us get through. And that's happened in the past. That's in those earlier caravans. That's certainly been a challenge. So I just wanted to say it's the financing is helpful. We no longer have a tax exempt status because of some of the work we do with you. We're fighting to get that back. We think it's unjust, unfair completely, but we also think the work that we do is important. So we've done it regardless of the threats, and they've come through with this particular threat. But we continue to march on. But all the more reason that the support of our friends across the country, it means so much. So just wanted to help underscore why the
But we do have a fiscal sponsor.
a fiscal sponsor. We
where
do.
You can write to them and get a tax write-off.
Yes. So you can make a check out to IFCO if you have checks, and we can put Alliance for Global Justice as our fiscal sponsor. So for folk who, if a check writing is of interest, I can give you the details about that. Were you going to say anything?
Well, real quick, has Pastors for Peace been prosecuted by the U.S. government and in the past? And is that possible in this July trip coming up?
That's a really good question. We have not been. We've been threatened. We've been audited more than once. We've had people who have traveled with us had received letters from the Treasury Department threatening them with these fines and imprisonment. Not lately. That hasn't happened in these latter years. I think because they knew we were going to just keep going. And we've got lawyers who, when people receive the letters, I received a letter, and we give them to the lawyers, and they do what they do, and they've been able to push back on any kind of individual persecution happens. But the organization has not been prosecuted. However, the reversal of this 501c3 or tax exempt status after 50 years. It was a little bit of a blow, but we said, you know what, the work is important. And it was important for us to do this caravan and to do the med school work and to Bill did a lot of going out to Standing Rock to kind of be a witness and to be in solidarity there. The work around the immigration is huge, and we continue to feel that we'll keep doing this as long as there's gas in the tank. And we feel that there's still a reason to be and a reason to do this. And we really feel it's in our DNA, so we keep doing the work. So far, so good. We haven't been stopped from doing the work, despite the threats. And as far as this summer, we don't know because we don't, like I said, we don't know which of the Trump, so I said his name. Oops, which one? Which 45? The orange one will show up. Will it be the business person, the businessman who says, this is okay, or will it be somebody who wants to be punitive and punishing, because he's promised, right-wing, primarily right-wing Cuban Americans that we're going to undo everything that Obama did. Which he could do. That's certainly possible. Sessions, there's so many unknowns. There's so many these characters. We just don't know who they are, what they're going to do. So it's possible, and that's all the more reason why we rely on the support of the folk who can sign up and we can reach out to. I'll just tell real quickly, back in the second caravan, 93, when we took a little yellow school bus. Some of you may know that story. There was a little yellow school bus that was among the things that we were taking to Cuba that was seized. And it was a school bus that was destined for a school for children with special needs. And the authorities at the border, this is from the U.S. going into Mexico, because we were driving to Mexico, put the aid onto a ship that went to Cuba. At the border, the bus was seized. The people on the bus held a hunger strike for 23 days in 110-degree heat. Bill Hill was probably the primary person who prepared what's in the drink that they had to drink, Bill?
Juice of 16 lemons, a cup of maple syrup, and a gallon of water.
So he made this concoction twice a day, but it was enough to keep their electrolytes at a certain level. But they fasted on this solution that was made for them. Point is that we were on the border. We were isolated down in a dusty town where there's not a whole lot, and many of us left to go to cities like Houston and New York and Philly and other places to draw attention, to do civil disobedience, to draw attention to their plight. But it was also the phone calls of our emergency response network that really won the day. We had notified the people like who signed on the list, hey, they held up these people, they're holding a hunger strike, we need you to call the Treasury. They did that to the point where they completely shut down the phone lines, because there were so many calls coming in, and eventually they relented. But I just wanted to show the power of our ability to collectively push back, how important it is.
When does the 501c3 end?
January of this year, after 5 years. It was a 5-year struggle.
Any particular reason?
The first reason that they gave was because we were fiscal sponsored. Does anybody know what a fiscal sponsor is? If you don't have tax exempt status, but you want, let's say you want to write a check to IFCO, but you'd like a tax write-off. You need to have a fiscal sponsor to do that through. If I have a foundation that wants to give a grant to the project, you have to do that through a fiscal sponsor. We were a fiscal sponsor for a project that was taking ambulances and medical supplies to the people of Gaza. And we had some people in Congress who just said, they're supporting Hamas, and they're supporting terrorism. Oh my God. And we said, that's what we're doing, but that was the first fight. And they said this isn't the group who we were providing the fiscal sponsorship was not a legitimate charity. So we went through all the steps to prove that it was legally. So then they said it's not that. They said it's because of the Cuba work that you're doing. And we said, but this is at the same time that President Obama is talking about normalizing relations. We're just doing what he's, pushing for. And then they said, and we said, besides, the authority to really, the jurisdiction for this doesn't lie with IRS, it lies with Treasury, a division within Treasury, OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control. But the Treasury Department is this jurisdiction, not the Internal Revenue Service. So then they said, oh, no, it's not Cuba. So it's not the Viva Palestina work, it's not Cuba, It's faulty paperwork. You don't have to have 50 years, you don't have a receipt for every single, check you might break. So they kept moving the goalpost, and we found out from one of the members of Congress that indeed there was so much that had been invested in this attack on IFCO that they felt that they weren't going to let it go. So after 5 years in January of this year, they sent the letter. Right?
January what?
Well, actually, it was dated December 29th, but we received it in the mail January 4th, but it was dated the 29th.
Obama was still president.
Oh, yeah, that's an important thing. This was not under 45, this was under,
44.
yeah.
I think you should run for Congress.
You do? Really, I don't know about
Well, if
that.
anybody has more questions.
One gun to another, 44 and 45.
Interesting.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.